crime and
The
mystery
Stolen
story
Diamond
collection.
Necklace. Once upon a time, in a quiet neighborhood, there was a beautiful diamond necklace worth a fortune. It belonged to Mrs. Johnson, an elderly lady who lived alone in a cozy house. She had inherited the necklace from her grandmother, and it was her most cherished possession. One evening, while Mrs. Johnson was out visiting a friend, a cunning thief named Joe spotted her house. He had heard rumors about the priceless diamond necklace and decided to steal it. Joe was known for his sneaky ways and had pulled off many thefts in the past. Joe waited until it was dark and the neighborhood was asleep. He quietly broke into Mrs. Johnson's house, avoiding any alarms or security. Carefully, he opened the safe where the necklace was kept and took it. The sparkling diamonds glimmered in the moonlight as he made his escape. The next morning, when Mrs. Johnson discovered her precious necklace missing, she was devastated. She immediately called the police, and Detective Smith was assigned to the case. Detective Smith was known for his sharp mind and determination. As Detective Smith investigated, he found a few clues: a broken window, some footprints, and a tiny piece of fabric caught in the safe. He began to piece together what had happened. He interviewed neighbors and gathered information about suspicious activities in the area. Days turned into weeks, and Detective Smith worked tirelessly. He finally traced Joe's criminal history and discovered he had a liking for valuable jewelry. Armed with this information, Detective Smith tracked down Joe's hideout and caught him red-handed trying to sell the stolen necklace. Joe was arrested, and the diamond necklace was returned to its rightful owner, Mrs. Johnson, who was overjoyed to have it back. Detective Smith's hard work and determination had paid off, and the quiet neighborhood could sleep peacefully once again, knowing that justice had been served. And so, the stolen diamond necklace found its way back home, and Joe learned that crime doesn't pay in the end. The Mysterious Mansion Murder. Story. In a small, picturesque town called Willowville, nestled deep in the countryside, a grand old mansion stood atop a hill. The mansion, known as the Hartwood Estate, had a long history filled with secrets and rumors. It was rumored that the mansion was haunted, and some said it was cursed. One foggy autumn evening, a gathering took place at the Hartwood Estate. The mansion had recently been sold to a wealthy businessman named Richard Thornton. Richard and his wife, Emily, had invited a group of friends over for a housewarming party. As the night grew darker, laughter and music echoed through the mansion's halls. The guests enjoyed fine wine and exquisite food in the elegant dining room. However, the jovial atmosphere took a dark turn when a scream pierced the air. The guests rushed to the source of the sound, only to find Emily Thornton lying lifeless on the floor of the mansion's opulent ballroom. Her evening gown was stained with blood, and a sharp, antique dagger was embedded in her chest. Panic and shock gripped the guests, and they immediately called the police. Detective Sarah Reynolds was assigned to the case. She arrived at the scene where the mansion's guests were questioned. Each guest seemed to have an alibi, and none of them claimed to have seen the murder take place. Detective Reynolds began her investigation, meticulously examining the crime scene. She discovered that the mansion had several secret passages and hidden rooms, which added to the mystery. The antique dagger used in the murder was traced back to a collection displayed in the mansion, but there were no fingerprints on it. As the days passed, Detective Reynolds uncovered a web of secrets within the Hartwood Estate. She learned that Emily Thornton had been researching the mansion's history and had recently uncovered a dark family secret which she had confided in a close friend. Suspects emerged as Detective Reynolds delved deeper into the lives of the mansion's residents and guests. Tensions ran high, and more secrets were revealed, including hidden relationships, rivalries, and old grudges. With careful detective work, Detective Reynolds unraveled the truth. The murder was a result of a decades-old vendetta involving the Thornton family and an unexpected twist involving the mansion's cursed history. In the end, justice was served as the murderer was apprehended, and the secrets of the Hartwood Estate were exposed. Willowville returned to its peaceful existence, yet the mansion's eerie reputation continued to haunt the town, serving as a reminder of the dark events that had unfolded within its walls. The Mysterious Mansion Murder became a legendary tale in Willowville, a chilling reminder of how even the most tranquil places can hide the darkest of secrets. The Midnight Strangler. Chapter 1. The First Victim. It was a dark and stormy night in the quiet town of Willowbrook. The wind howled through the trees as heavy rain poured down, casting an eerie ambience over the town. Detective Sarah Mitchell had just finished her shift and was enjoying a cup of coffee at the local diner when her phone rang. "Detective Mitchell, you're needed at the scene," said the voice on the other end. Sarah sighed, knowing that her night was far from over. She grabbed her raincoat and rushed to the crime scene, a small house on the outskirts of town. As she arrived, she was greeted by flashing police lights and a crowd of onlookers huddled under umbrellas. Inside the house, the scene was gruesome. The victim, a middle-aged woman named Linda Turner, lay lifeless on the living room floor. Her hands were tied with a silk scarf, and a dark red mark adorned her neck. It was clear that Linda had been strangled to death. Sarah's partner, Detective Mike Anderson, was already on the scene. He looked up at Sarah as she entered the room. "Looks like we've got another one," Mike muttered grimly. Chapter 2. A pattern emerges. As Sarah and Mike delved into the investigation, they soon discovered that Linda Turner was not the first victim of what appeared to be a serial killer in their town. 3 similar murders had occurred over the past 6 months, each victim strangled with a silk scarf. The killer left no fingerprints, no DNA, and no clues that would lead them to his identity. The victims seemed to have nothing in common, except for one strange detail. Each murder had occurred exactly 6 weeks apart, always on a stormy night, and always after midnight. The killer had been dubbed the Midnight Strangler by the media. The town of Willowbrook was gripped by fear as news of the murder spread. Residents locked their doors and avoided going out after dark. Sarah and Mike worked tirelessly, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence, and trying to piece together the puzzle. But the killer remained elusive. Chapter 3. The Breakthrough. Months passed, and the Midnight Strangler continued his reign of terror. Sarah and Mike were running out of leads, and the pressure was mounting. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A local historian named Emily Hayes had been researching Willowbrook's history and discovered a series of old newspaper articles dating back over a century. They spoke of a series of unsolved murders in the town, eerily similar to the current string of killings. The victims had all been women, strangled with silk scarves, and the murders had occurred in the same 6-week interval. Sarah and Mike realized that they were dealing with a copycat killer who was replicating the murders from Willowbrook's dark past. Armed with this knowledge, they began to dig deeper into the town's history, hoping to uncover clues that would lead them to the killer's identity. Chapter 4. The Showdown. Their research led them to an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, a place that had once belonged to a wealthy family who had been implicated in the century-old murders. Sarah and Mike decided to stake out the mansion, hoping that the killer would return to the scene of his inspiration. As the stormy night descended, they waited in the shadows. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, wearing a black raincoat and carrying a silk scarf. It was the Midnight Strangler. A tense standoff ensued as Sarah and Mike confronted the killer. The Strangler fought fiercely, but Sarah and Mike's determination prevailed. They managed to subdue him and remove the silk scarf from his grasp. As they arrested him, the Strangler's face contorted with rage. Chapter 5. The Revelation. In the interrogation room, the Midnight Strangler revealed his motive. He had become obsessed with the unsolved murders from Willowbrook's past and had sought to recreate them, believing it would grant him power and notoriety. He had meticulously planned each murder, targeting victims who had no connection to him or each other. With the evidence against him, the Midnight Strangler was sentenced to life in prison, bringing an end to the reign of terror that had gripped Willowbrook. The town could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that they were safe from this copycat killer. Detective Sarah Mitchell and Detective Mike Anderson received accolades for their dedication and persistence in solving the case. They knew that the scarred history of Willowbrook would forever be marred by the Midnight Strangler's dark legacy. But they had brought closure to the victims' families and ensured that justice was served. Shadows of Deceit. Chapter 1. The Disappearance. The small coastal town of Harbour Haven had always been a peaceful place, but on a crisp autumn morning, the tranquility was shattered. Elizabeth Monroe, a well-known local artist, had disappeared without a trace. Her studio, nestled in a charming cottage by the sea, was in disarray, with paint splatters and overturned canvases. Detective Alex Carter was assigned to the case. As he stepped into Elizabeth's studio, he couldn't help but notice the eerie silence that hung in the air. The only clue was a mysterious note left on her cluttered desk. They're watching. Chapter 2. The Enigmatic Note. The cryptic note left Detective Carter with more questions than answers. Who was they, and why were they watching Elizabeth? His investigation led him to Elizabeth's closest friends and acquaintances, who were equally baffled by her disappearance. Among those questioned was Margaret Douglas, a reclusive neighbor who lived next door to Elizabeth. She was known for her eccentric behavior and had often been seen watching Elizabeth from her window. Margaret claimed to have seen nothing unusual on the morning of the disappearance. Chapter 3. Secrets Unveiled. As Detective Carter delved deeper into Elizabeth's life, he discovered a web of secrets and betrayals. Elizabeth had been involved in a clandestine affair with a prominent local businessman, John Thornton. The affair had put her at odds with John's wife, Emily, who was known for her influence in the town. Emily was furious when she learned of her husband's infidelity and had threatened Elizabeth publicly. Could Emily's anger have driven her to harm Elizabeth? Meanwhile, Margaret's behavior grew more suspicious. A search of her home revealed a collection of newspaper clippings about Elizabeth, along with a journal filled with bizarre drawings and ramblings. Chapter 4. A Twist of Fate. The investigation took a surprising turn when a fisherman discovered a body washed ashore, not far from Elizabeth's cottage. It was identified as Elizabeth Monroe, confirming the worst fears of her friends and family. Her cause of death was not immediately apparent, but signs of struggle were evident. Detective Carter now had a murder case on his hands, and the shadow of suspicion loomed over Margaret, Emily, and even John Thornton. Each had a motive, but the evidence was circumstantial at best. Chapter 5. The Truth Unveiled. As Detective Carter painstakingly pieced together the evidence, he uncovered a shocking revelation. Elizabeth's death was not a result of the affair or Emily's anger, nor was it Margaret's obsession. Instead, it was the work of an unknown third party. In a dramatic confrontation, Detective Carter exposed the real killer, Henry Matthews, a struggling artist who had long resented Elizabeth's success. Henry had orchestrated the disappearance to frame Emily, knowing it would create chaos and divert suspicion away from him. In a chilling confession, Henry revealed how he had murdered Elizabeth in a fit of jealousy, and then returned her body to the sea to make it appear as if she had drowned. The "they're watching" note had been part of his sinister plan to sow confusion. With Henry Matthews behind bars, Harbour Haven began to heal, and the community came together to remember Elizabeth Monroe's artistry and spirit. Detective Carter knew that beneath the tranquil surface of their seaside town, shadows of deceit could hide the darkest of secrets.